why banks are weak, and why life insurance companies are strong and safe. Barry, you mentioned that life insurance companies will always be safer than banks for savings. Why do you say this?
Well, first you must look at things from a historical perspective, and this is kind of inspired me to do this because someone said they weren't going to put their money with life company and they're going to put it in a bank after they just lost $115,000 in Vanguard last week. But in any event, history may not repeat itself, but it rhymes. And we're in the midst of the greatest financial correction since the Great Depression. This is bigger than 2007 and 2008, no question about it. But after the stock market crash in 1929, the vaporization of wealth was incredible. Over 650 banks failed in 1929 alone. An additional 1,300 banks failed the year after. In 1933, 4,000 banks went out of business alone. All told, roughly 9,000 banks failed during the Great Depression, which was a run on customer deposits. However, during that same time period, according to research done by Solomon Huebner, founder of the American College, 99.9% of the life insurance companies remained solvent. So when banks were going insolvent, banks remained solvent. And life insurance companies just did a great job of protecting people's savings through legal reserve life companies when banks were dropping like flies.
How many banks have failed recently, say in the past 20 years?
Well, I didn't even realize this myself, but we're going to put the shot from the FDIC. According to the FDIC's, between 2001 and today, in 2020, more than 559 banks have failed during the United States. But there's been virtually no failures of life insurance companies. Although there has been some receiverships, no collapses like banks.
Who are some of the largest banking institutions to fail since the last financial crisis?
Well, there's been some gigantic ones. The first one was probably Washington Mutual, the giant subprime lending business based out of Seattle. They got a $7 billion infusion of capital from Texas Pacific Group, and they still went under. IndyMac Bank Corp., which was in Pasadena, which is a subprime, no documentation loan company. They went bankrupt essentially in 2008 or 9. And then they had the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation take over the bank. And now, and they get more credible subsidies from the taxpayer. The interesting thing about IndyMac Bank, that was taken over by current U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and George Soros and J. Christopher Flowers and billionaire Michael Dell of Dell Computers. They changed the name to One West Bank and they sold that to CIT Financial for $3.4 billion in 2015. Bank United, which was another giant bank, mortgage bank down in Coral Gables, Florida, they imploded in 2008 with more than $12 billion in assets. Like IndyMac, they were taken over by private equity, and the deal was essentially funded by the Carlyle Group, Blackstone LP, Centerbridge, and Wilbur Ross, who owned W.L. Ross and Company. Wilbur Ross, who is 82, is now the Commerce Secretary of the United States.
What other bank-like financial institutions that have failed recently?
Well, this is why, at many events, a lot of these institutions related to banks have failed. AmeriQuest Mortgage, I don't remember, they used to do all the Super Bowl ads. They collapsed in August of 2007. Merrill Lynch, which is now part of Bank of America, they collapsed in 2008 because they were essentially the Walmart of subprime mortgages. This is an enormous bailout by the taxpayer. GMAC Mortgage and Bank Company, which was the finance arm of General Motors and was owned by Cerberus Capital Management, they collapsed in 2008. It was rescued with the taxpayer with $17.4 billion in bailout. Bear Stearns collapsed in 2008. It dumped all its losses on the Federal Reserve and is now part of JP Morgan Chase. Lehman Brothers collapsed, the largest corporate bankruptcy of all U.S. history with $660 billion in assets. That collapsed in 2008. Wachovia Bank, the largest bank in the South, collapsed in 2008. Countrywide Financial, the big mortgage dealer, they collapsed in 2008. Sovereign Bank, the giant Pennsylvania bank, collapsed in 2008, October, really. Downing Savings and Loan, based out of California, they collapsed in November 2008. HSBC Finance Corporation, that's the giant American-based finance company. For you older people, remember the old Beneficial Finance. That was acquired by HSBC in 2002, the British bank, and they collapsed into bankruptcy in 2009. And then you have the European banks. This is just named a few of them. Royal Bank of Scotland, which owned the local bank around here, Citizens Bank, they collapsed. ABN AMRO, the Dutch bank, Northern Rock, British bank, Hypo Real Estate, the German bank, HBOS, Bradford and Bingley, Dexia, Lloyds. Those are some of the European banks that failed. And, Deutsche Bank still a accident waiting to happen. The irony of the whole thing is that neither Goldman Sachs nor Morgan Stanley would have existed today but they were allowed to become bank holding companies, which gave them essentially free cash from the Federal Reserve.
Why do so many banks fail?
Simply put, because, and most people don't understand this, but for every dollar a bank has on deposit, they can legally lend out to the public 9 times. And during the financial crisis, the prior financial crisis, banks like Merrill Lynch, UBS, Credit Suisse, Morgan Stanley, Lehman, Goldman, Citigroup, Bear Stearns, Bank of America, and dozens more were levered out 30 to 1. So they're very, very unstable because so much leverage. Deutsche Bank at the time was levered out at 60 to 1. And Citigroup, if you took all their offshore entities in the English Channel Islands, were levered as much as 100 to 1. So banks, look at only about, if one person out of 100 understands this, I'd be surprised, but people need to understand that banks are very, very leveraged. And not only that, they're lousy stewards of wealth. But now wealth management is a big part of their business.
Simply put, why are life insurance companies safer than banks?
Well, there's a number of reasons, and people should visit my website and buy my books, The Pirates of Manhattan, and they go to the website www.barrymdike.com. But there's a number of key reasons, and these are some of them. First of all, a life insurance or annuity is a contract between free people and subject to the rule of law. There's no rule of law in mutual funds with banks, whether it be with Vanguard, BlackRock, Fidelity, etc. A life insurance contract, or annuity for that matter, makes promises to pay, whereas asset managers, the giants, they make no promises whatsoever. That's first main reason. Second, life insurance companies, unlike banks, are not highly leveraged like all U.S. banks. They cannot create money out of thin air like banks can. For every dollar the person puts into the insurance company, there has to be $1 in reserve to back it up. So essentially, they're not unstable like banks because they can't over-leverage their assets. 3, life insurance companies are highly regulated. But I question the sustainability of some life insurance companies that are managed by private equity firms such as Apollo Global Management, Guggenheim, Partners, Blackstone LP, and Goldman Sachs. Though people's savings will probably be safer in those companies than they will with ordinary mutual fund. There's many more reasons, of course, but they can get my books online.
So you are saying that life insurance companies are safer than banks because they cannot be leveraged. Their portfolios are overseen by state insurance commissioners. So if these life insurance companies, as stewards of capital, do banks invest their own money in life insurance companies?
Yes, this is for the doubting Thomas out there, but yes, all the major banks, the big ones, as well as the Federal Reserve, invest a lot of their own capital with life insurance companies. The big giant, the big daddies, the J.P. Morgan Chases of the world, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank, TD Bank, PNC, you name it. I mean, these giant ones, 79.5% of these banks invest in high cash value life insurance and annuities. The major banks are doing this to de-risk their capital, like consumers should de-risk theirs. So in other words, 80% of the population is actually doing it. Well, actually 80% of the banks are doing this. They've purchased more than $171 billion in cash surrender value of life with an aggregate death benefit over $1 trillion. So, but conversely, now this is also done by Michael White Associates, and these are figures as of December 31st, 2019. So this is research I've backed up. Conversely, only about 9% of the population in their qualified savings plans, only 9% of the people who participate in 401ks have a guaranteed income stream with annuities or life insurance. So there's a lot of education to be done on this space, and this is why I'm doing these things. In any event, as the Bible says, my people perish due to lack of knowledge. If you'd like a second opinion on how to use cash value life insurance in your life or how to create a lifetime income using annuities, please contact me at bdykett@camnh.com or purchase my books at www.bearjames.com. Our telephone number here is 603-929-7891. And thanks for watching.